Hey everyone, it's Unique History Channel. This will be reading from Major Entitlement by Chris Caldwell. We'll be reading the part Black Lives Matter. Along the legend of Ferguson, not the incident itself, but as the legend, as Dorian Johnson first laid it out, was born the Black Lives Matter movement. The weakness of the movement's argument was that justice miscarried this case was not a reason to dismiss it. On the contrary, this was a sign the era was pregnant with such movements which are often driven by the aspirations and opportunities by grievances. Three black women who described themselves as queer had launched a hashtag Black Lives Matter in 2013 after the acquittal of Florida Neighborhood Watch captain George Zimmerman, who had claimed self-defense after shooting a young black man, Trayvon Martin. Their posts were equivalent of Rick Santelli's 2009 rant, which introduced the concept of Tea Party before there was one. Indeed, Black Lives Matter could be considered a youthful, mostly minority counterpart to the mostly white Tea Party. The Tea Party had launched an insurrection against Barack Obama and what it held him to represent. Now Black Lives Matter was entering that fray on the other side. Infuriated inner-city residents, idealist college students, hip-hop musicians, billionaire managers of foundation, criminals and prison inmates, athletes, Black Lives Matter brought together these establishment and anti-establishment elements in an extraordinary ferment. It had supported inside the Obama White House, and it had elements of support in the most radical parts of the American left. Black Lives Matter used the concept of staying woke to describe their initiation into esoteric ideological truth in the same way enthusiasm of the rising alt-right would use the term of being red-pilled. Historian Todd Gillen, a 1960s protester who had written a classical account of his own era's rebellion, saw in Black Lives Matter and a movement of young people who were civic-minded in the way his contemporaries had been. They had a constructive agenda for reforming law enforcement to end broken windows policing philosophy of policing, which has seen many city kids jailed for minor offenses, reform the bail system, introduce enough dashboard cameras, and other technology to put police on the watch. That did not make the Black Lives Matter movement irresponsible, Ginn said. Contrary to what white racists and police like to say, the spirit of Black Lives does not mean only Black Lives Matter. He wrote, it's the third syllogism that goes like this. 1, all lives matter. 2, Black lives are lives. And 3, Black Lives Matter. So what 1960s radical wished Black Lives Matter to mean, to the point he was willing to tar as racist anyone who disagreed with him. Problem was, leaders of Black Lives Matter addressed Gittin's symbology explicitly and repudiated. All three candidates for the following year's Democratic presidential nomination tried to make peace among their faction constituents by uttering a version of the All Lives Matter symbolism, and were forced to apologize for doing so. One of them, the former Maryland governor Martin O'Malley, attended Netroots Nation conference in Arizona and was booed for saying All Lives Matter. Days later, Joseph Coturne, mayor of Somerville, Massachusetts, flew the Black Lives Matter banner and spent several days sparring with local police who wanted him to hoist an All Lives Matter banner instead. The very name Black Lives Matter, once changed from a hashtag to a political movement, implied that there was a group of people in American society who did not believe in the right of a significant part of the population. It was an incendiary accusation. Who did Black Lives Matter believe people were indifferent to others, who had been supposedly sprung at the moment where races had never been more equal mixed? If they were in government, Black Lives Matter was like a party of revolution. How legitimate can a government be if it does not care if its citizens live or die? If those people outside the government, Black Lives Matter looked like something more threatening still, a party of race war. Every time someone was shot dead by police under difficult to piece together circumstances, a daily occurrence in a vast and well-armed country where there were tensions. In the last days of 2014, an unstable Baltimore man named 𝘌𝘯𝘶 drove. 2 officers were shot outside the Ferguson, Missouri police station in March 2015. When Freddie Gray, another young man from Baltimore with a long rap sheet, died of a spinal injury in police custody a month later, there were nights of wild rioting. The following summer, in the middle of the presidential election season, 2 armed black men were shot and killed by police on consecutive days. On July 5th, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Alton Sterling, a street vendor of music CDs, was wrestled to the ground while resisting 2 policemen and shot dead. A day later, Philando Castile was shot dead at a traffic stop in Falcon Heights, Minnesota, by a policeman who, video released a year later, seemed to show, panicked when Castile calmly told him he was carrying a weapon. The videos available at the time were ambiguous, but sufficient to bring a full mobilization of Black Lives Matter. Protests on July 7th, the day after the Castile killing, ended in insurrectionary confusion. The edges of Black Lives Matter march in Dallas. Micah Xavier Johnson, a well-trained and heavily armed black veteran of the Afghan War, shot 14 policemen, killing 5, and soon thereafter, politically excitable St. Louis black man named Gavin Long stole a car and drove it to Baton Rouge, where on July 17th, between the BQ convenience store and the Hair Crown Beauty Supply on the airline highway, he shot 6 police officers, killing 3. The rage of young blacks against the police was turning to something bigger than a protest. "You can't stop the revolution," they chanted in Chicago. Black Lives Matter activists announced they would continue their marches even after killing a policeman in Dallas. It's not a setback at all. One side is showing the point, people of the country, that the black people are getting to a boiling point. But why are they getting to a boiling point now? It was improbable that police departments were turning into nests of white vigilante at the juncture when police officers of all races were being closely surveilled. Dallas had a black police chief, Baton Rouge had a black mayor, Baltimore had a black mayor, a black public prosecutor, and black chiefs, and 3 of the 6 officers tried in the Freddie Gray case were black. And the president was also part black. Part of the reason this time will be different, Obama said during the Ferguson controversy, is because the President of the United States is deeply invested in making sure this time is different. Eric Holder visited Mike Brown's family in St. Louis. "I speak to them not just as Attorney General, but as a father," he said. Black Lives Matter has some traits of the official protest movement. The White House would serve as an activist clearinghouse for social movements, including edgy, confrontational, identitarian ones. Black Lives Matter was building bridges to a variety of groups, but they were almost exclusively communities that had made up the Democratic Party's electoral and funding base. Democrats were 3 times as likely, 51%, as Republicans, 17%, to support its goals. The movement for Black Lives called for ends of war on black, trans, queer, and gender non-conforming people. Travis Goza, an Africana Studies professor at Cornell, author of Remixing Change, Hip Hop and Obama, likened it to the Silicon Valley philosophy of disrupting innovation and calling the movement digital. There's also a place where Black Lives Matter and the Democratic donor class too. Across the country, you could see rainbow flags flying alongside Black Lives Matter posters in rich and academic neighborhoods. And only in those neighborhoods. The antithesis between the regime and the street was fading. Every radical movement is a rebirth of sorts, because political establishments are built on doctrine, and changing doctrine requires as much unlearning as learning. Radicals reconnect with wisdom that the existing regime, in order to prevail, had discard or suppress. Black Lives Matter reconnected to the certain realities of the 1960s civil rights movement that had been buried under official celebrations of the movement as a pacifistic, harmonious, and Christian. Ta-Nehisi Coates insisted on his own, and Travis Goza stressed that Black Lives Matter was atheist or non-denominational. Black Lives Matter rose amid a rival of Black Power, and even Coates' case, the Black Panther tendency. Janine Thoreau Harris, biographer of Rosa Parks, showed this trait was a bigger part of the 1960s civil rights movement than 21st century Americans of any other race were comfortable acknowledging. Theo Harris chastised Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed for saying, amid the 2016 protests, "Dr. King would never take over for Ray." What did Mayor Reed think Selma was? These framings Theo Harris wrote was misrepresented the movements like BLM activists are building across the country in the history of the civil rights movement. That was true. The editors of Philadelphia Inquirer headlined an article by Harvard Law professor Randall Kennedy, "Black Lives Matter, the next stage of the civil rights movement." If Black Lives Matter was civil rights, then the country had, because as we know, civil rights had become a de facto constitution. The various extensions that black and white progressives had successfully fought to attach civil rights, above all affirmative action and political correctness, has ceased to be temporary expedients. They were essential parts of the new constitutional structure, meant to shore it up as was impotent or self-contradictory, in the way that Chief Justice John Marshall's mentions of the judiciary in the Marbury v. Madison 1801 case had been a shoring up of the first Constitution. Without these innovations, if you didn't like affirmative action and political correctness, you didn't like civil rights. And for their part, politicians who claimed civil rights as a governing ideal grew easy when they saw a movement as turbulent and impactful as Black Lives Matter, speaking in its name. They call it identity politics, as if there were an aberration. It was not. It was a culmination.